Hello, this video is about finding the volume of any rectangular prism. We have a rectangular prism pictured right here. You'll notice that it has rectangles for faces and that it's made up of unit cubes. Shaded in green here is one unit cube. If we can figure out how many unit cubes make up this rectangular prism, we have found its volume. Volume is the amount of space that this whole figure takes up. One way that we can figure out the total number of cubes is to first recognize that the rectangular prism is made up of layers. We can see one of these layers here. Since we can see that there are 3 rows of 4 cubes, or we could also see that there are 4 rows of 3 cubes, we can use a multiplication expression to find the volume of this top layer. I'm choosing the multiplication expression 3 multiplied by 4 to figure out the total number of unit cubes here. And that gives me 12. So the volume of this layer is 12. We can also see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers, and they each are identical. So they each have 12 cubes as their volume. If we know the number of cubes in one layer is 12, and we know that there are 5 layers, we can write a new multiplication expression that'll give us the total number of unit cubes. And that expression is going to include the volume of one layer, which is 12, multiplied by the total number of layers, which is 5, and that gives us a total volume of 60 cubic units. This picture right here really does a nice job of showing us how we can take a rectangular prism and break it into separate layers. In this case, there are 3 layers in this rectangular prism, and it looks like each layer contains 1, 2, 3, 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cubes. Let's write a multiplication expression to find the volume of this top layer here. The expression 4 multiplied by 5 gives us the volume of each of these 3 layers, and that's 20. The expression we can use to find the total volume of the rectangular prism is 20 multiplied by 3, which gives us a volume of 60 cubic units. The 20 refers to the 20 cubes that are in each layer. The 3 comes from the 3 layers of the 20. The picture of this rectangular prism has each layer colored a different color. Pause the video if you want to see if you can come up with a multiplication expression that will lead to the total volume of this rectangular prism. Remember, we need to find how many cubes are in one layer and then multiply that by the number of layers in the rectangular prism. Here's a picture of another rectangular prism. See if you can write a multiplication expression that would give us the volume for the entire rectangular prism. 10 multiplied by 5 represents the volume of this rectangular prism because in one layer we see we have 10 cubes and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. But I can express the factor 10 a little bit differently, but still be equivalent. Since I see that there are 2 rows of 5, I could rewrite this 10 factor as 2 multiplied by 5. I put parentheses around 2 multiplied by 5 because I want it to be clear that those 2 factors are describing the volume of one layer. The expression 2 multiplied by 5 in the parentheses should remind some of you from what we've been talking about in the last couple days of class, and that is a particular part of the rectangular prism. Rectangular prisms have 6 faces. The face of the rectangular prism that the prism is resting upon is called the base. But notice that the face that we call the base is also equal to the face opposite. So we call the bottom and the top of the rectangular prism bases. But what I've been stressing to my students is that the face that is at the bottom of the rectangular prism, that's the face that we're going to refer to as the base. Because we could move or reposition any rectangular prism, any of its 6 faces could potentially be a base. Please take a look at this rectangular prism. Inside this prism, we can see that there is a base layer of 9 unit cubes. If you can imagine looking underneath this rectangular prism at this base layer, it would look something like this. It's 3 layers of 3 squares. If we recall from 3rd and 4th grade, we learned about something called area. And area is actually related to volume because it too talks about the amount of space inside of something. But area is the amount of space inside of a 2-dimensional figure, like this square. And we can determine the area of this square by counting all the squares inside. But there is a faster way. Area is equal to the length by the width. In this case, both the length and the width are equal to 3. And when we multiply the length and the width, we get an area of 9. So that tells us that the area that we would see in this bottom layer, or base layer, is equal to 9. Check out this rectangular prism right here. We know that there's a base layer. And we know that the base layer here is identical to the layer up top. And that's helpful because that tells us that the area of this base layer is going to be found by multiplying the length and the width of this rectangle that's at the bottom of the rectangular prism. But how does this information help us find the volume of this whole prism? Well, if we know the area of a base layer, and in this case we certainly do, then we can multiply that area by the height of the rectangular prism. But what's the height? The height of the rectangular prism is equal to the number of layers that we see. Or another way you could think about it is, just like a person's height is the distance from the soles of their feet to the top of their head, we can think of the height of a rectangular prism as the distance between its base layer and the face, or the layer that's at the top of the rectangular prism. In this case, there are 3 layers, so the height is equal to 3. And so we have our multiplication expression set before us. I put parentheses around 3 multiplied by 4 because I see that the 3 multiplied by 4 go together when finding the area of the base. When we evaluate this expression, we see that 3 multiplied by 4 is 12, and when we multiply that by 3, we get a volume of 36. Please consider this rectangular prism. In our last example, we found the volume by multiplying the area of the base by the height. Pause the video and see if you can create a multiplication expression using the area of the base of this rectangular prism multiplied by its height. The expression 2 multiplied by 4 in parentheses multiplied by 7 is the expression we can use to find the volume of this rectangular prism. The area of the base is represented by the 2 and the 4, which describe the area 8 here in this layer, which, again, is the same as this base layer here. The 7 represents the height of this rectangular prism. When we multiply 2 and 4, we get 8. And when we multiply 8 by 7, we have a product of 56. And that tells us that the volume of this rectangular prism is 56. Sometimes we see rectangular prisms that are represented without unit cubes. And instead, we have numbers and units that represent the dimensions of the rectangular prism. But we can still use the formula, area of the base multiplied by the height, to find the volume. I've colored in green the base of this rectangular prism, and I can find its area by multiplying its length by its width, just like we did in the last examples when we had rectangular prisms made of unit cubes. We can describe 7 centimeters as the width of the base. We can describe 5 centimeters as the length of the base. But it's also true if we switch the width and the length around. It's not really a big deal whether you call this side of the base the length or the width. 3 centimeters represents the height of this rectangular prism. So if we know the length and the width of the base, and we know the height of the rectangular prism, we have all the information we need to figure out the volume of this rectangular prism. Using the volume formula, area of the base multiplied by height, we can fill in the values of these dimensions and figure out the volume. So the area of the base, we can figure that out by multiplying the length and the width So that would be 7 multiplied by 5. And I'm putting parentheses around that. That lets me know that these two factors go together. And now I'm going to multiply the area of the base by the height. And now all I have to do is simplify this expression. Well, 7 multiplied by 5 is 35. And then I need to multiply 35 by 3. And what I like to do is I like to break up my factors into place value. So 35, in my head, I see that as 30 and 5. So I'm going to multiply 3 by 30 first. That's 90. Then I'm going to multiply 3 by 5. That's 15. When I combine 90 and 15, I get 105. And 105, or 105 cubic centimeters is the volume of this rectangular prism. And I put a little exponent 3 above my units, and that tells me that I have cubic units. I hope watching this video helps make finding the volume of a rectangular prism easier. Thank you for watching.